Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit from the preface, paragraphs 9 and 10. This modest complacency in receiving, or this sparingness in giving, does not, however, befit science. Whoever seeks mere edification, and whoever wants to shroud in a mist the manifold variety of his earthly existence and of thought in order to pursue the indeterminate enjoyment of this indeterminate divinity, may look where he likes to find all this. He will find ample opportunity to dream up something for himself. But philosophy must beware of the wish to be edifying. Still less must this complacency, which abjures science, claim that such rapturous haziness is superior to science. This prophetic talk supposes that it is staying right in the center and in the depths, looks disdainfully at determinateness, horos, and deliberately holds aloof from notion and necessity as products of that reflection which is at home only in the finite. But just as there is an empty breadth, so too there is an empty depth. And just as there is an extension of substance that pours forth as a finite multiplicity without the force to hold the multiplicity together, so there is an intensity without content, one that holds itself in as a sheer force without spread. And this is in no way distinguishable from superficiality. The power of spirit is only as great as its expression, its depth only as deep as it dares to spread out and lose itself in its exposition. Moreover, when this non-conceptual, substantial knowledge professes to have sunk the idiosyncrasy of the self in essential being, and to philosophize in a true and holy manner, it hides the truth from itself. By spurning measure and definition, instead of being devoted to God, it merely gives itself free rein, both to the contingency of the content within it and to its own caprice. Such minds, when they give themselves up to the uncontrolled ferment of the divine substance, imagine that by drawing a veil over self-consciousness and surrendering understanding, they become the beloved of God, to whom he gives wisdom in sleep. And hence, what they in fact receive and bring to birth in their sleep is nothing but dreams. Okay, so here Hegel, we're still on that critique of intuitionism here, and he gives us this very little paragraph which in which he targets the aim of edification, the idea that philosophy should aim for edification rather than insight. Edification, I suppose, meaning something like spiritual well-being, or I don't know, the health of the ego, something like that. And Hegel, just as Lacan would be very, very suspicious of ego psychology, suspicious of any form of therapy that involved restoring the supposed wholeness of the ego, I guess Hegel is suspicious of any form of thought that favors personal well-being over insight. And that sentence, the closing sentence of that little paragraph, but philosophy must beware of the wish to be edifying. I think another rather poignant little moment in the preface, this sense that you know, if you're going to start philosophizing at all, if you're going to start pursuing some sort of absolute truth, you sort of have to be willing to take the risk that that truth might not actually flatter your ego. It might actually turn out to be something quite ugly and unpleasant. it might not, as I think most forms of religions do, give you the impression that the universe was designed with you in mind. Um, and I think Hegel wants to take very, very seriously the idea that there is a risk involved in the task of philosophy, that you might end up finding things out that you may actually even come to regret. There may be something of, Tiresias' warning to Oedipus in his little ominous caveat here. But what I want to focus on even more than that, he seems to be really taking aim at not so much the kinds of, I guess, liberal pragmatism that we might think of as taking edification as the basic aim of thought, but specifically religious mysticism. And he focuses on its tendency to sort of empty itself out, to render itself completely indeterminate and non-doctrinal. By adhering to experience, it really deprives itself of the ability to develop in any kind of a deep or interesting way. And he has these wonderful little almost paradoxical expressions: an empty depth, an intensity without concept. Which he says is in no way distinguishable from superficiality. So for all the religious mysticism's pretense to have reached to genuine spiritual profundity, we always seem to find it more or less doing the same thing. Never really giving us anything more than the hazy dream language. He uses this term, the uncontrolled ferment of the divine substance, and I think it seems to be characteristic of the language of religious mysticism that it so often uses these terms of like liquid or gaseous chemical states, diffusing, melting, evaporating, or in this case, fermenting, to describe what goes on. But in every case, there's something about it that seems kind of sort of deflating. Maybe that would even be one more image that we could add to that. Something of the idea that all of this religious experience amounts to a big wet fart. And I think that's kind of what Hegel is pointing to in some of his language here. But he also gives us this wonderful sentence in the middle of the paragraph: the power of spirit is only as great as its expression, its depth only as deep as it dares to spread out and lose itself in its exposition. The idea, I think, here is that in departing from immediate experience, in putting the immediate encounter with the divine into question, and indeed putting one's own self into question, one's own memory, one's own ability to apprehend what's happening in the throes of religious experience, one is taking a certain risk. One is the idea that in pursuing spirit through philosophy, there is definitely a kind of risk involved, that one has to be sort of willing to spread out and lose oneself in exposition, which again I think speaks to the idea that philosophy should not be edifying. If you're approaching it with the idea that this is somehow going to equip you to live a better life or a happier life, or it's going to make you somehow more mentally stable, you're kind of barking up the wrong tree. The stress that Hegel puts here is on that dimension of risk, that spirit, in order to find itself, has to lose itself first. It has to engage in the serious and the dangerous and the painful labor of the negative in order to render itself worthy of genuine philosophic insight.